Hi, and welcome to this special edition of the Other World podcast. We have Trayci Tompkins here from Karoo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. Hi, Trayci, and hi, Fee.
Hi, Danny. Hi,
everyone. I was so excited at the idea of having you on here, Trayci. Trayci and I are both in a art tribe together with Louise Fletcher. Trayci's actually, what's your role there? Would you call it? Are you moderator? Are you what would you call that?
My role there is community manager. So I do a lot of the admin side and also now creating more of the content for the art tribe. Yeah, stretching me.
Yeah. And recently interviewed me, so I just thought, well, I'm gonna get you back by having you on here and finding out more about you. But I'll just sort of go into a little bits and pieces that I found out about you from your website. You are a storyteller, adventurer, ceramicist, and a fine artist. As I said before, living in Karoo, which I'd never heard of, but it's the Eastern Cape of South Africa. You've owned a gallery there. You're a traveler. Actually, there was a quote on your page that I liked, that I think I'll read. That's yours. Life for me is just that, a journey to faraway places of continuous learning, of life's highs and lows, of truly meaningful connection with others, which I think is a beautiful thing that we all have in common, because this podcast is about connection. And it's so beautiful to connect with somebody that is on land that is as meaningful and has as much history as the land that you're on. It's such a big part of our what we do, Fiona and I, taking women out to land here. So I just thought it'd be so interesting to have you on and get a totally different perspective from a different piece of land. So welcome.
Thanks, Fiona. It is, and thanks, Danny. I think that it's been for me a different journey now for this past year, because I moved from inland, where I had my gallery and my art business for the last 25 years, and before I immigrated I'm planning to immigrate to the UK this next month. And it's been a process. It's been a year's process. And I didn't want to leave South Africa until I was ready. I didn't feel ready. And we came down to the Eastern Cape, which is an area that I didn't know much about. But it is meaningful land in that it is harsh. I love the contrast that we have here. Very harsh, very thorny. This area that I'm in has been in drought for 10 years. And only after we arrived did the rains come for the first time in 10 years, really. And they came and they changed the landscape. And the animals changed. The animals fattened up. There was more grazing for them. And so for me, this is a very special place. There's something about this place. It's a little village in the middle of nowhere. You pass the giraffe and the buck and the wild animals on your way to the store. So it takes you a good 40 minutes on a dirt road to get to the tar road that joins you to the nearest town. So it's a long journey if you run out of bread and milk. But that's also changed. My husband was very much a daily shopper for his groceries. I think he likes to chat to the tellers at the store. So that was a difficult adjustment for him. But I think that this place has been, it will always be so meaningful to me and has set me up in a different way now, so that I've gone a little deeper into just being comfortable with me and comfortable with my country. And it's been very special.
So when you say you moved from inland, whereabouts were you before?
I was up in KwaZulu-Natal, which is a province a good 12 hours drive away. And it's very lush, a lot of forestry in that area, paper forestry, very hilly, very farmy. And that's where I grew up there. And so my whole life was there, really. All my friends, all my family, everybody's there. And we had a friend who was living here in this little village, and there was one house available because it's a very small village. And she said, I'm moving out of this house and I'm on my own. Why don't, you know, I'm feeling a little bit lonely. So I said, well, we'll come down and we'll help you settle. And so that's kind of the reason. It just popped in my head, you know, as these things do. And so we decided to come here. We sold our property, and we'd sold our gallery a year before. We sold our property, and then we had to wrap up our other ceramic businesses. And I had to wrap up my ceramics as well. I was kind of transitioning between art and ceramics. So we had 6 weeks to literally clear out 3 houses and close down businesses and reach and train people to take over the other business. And it all just was a bit of a whirlwind. I had catering equipment for 150 people. I was like, who needs catering equipment for 150 people for all our events that we were doing? So there was a lot to clear up. And then we came here and just paused and rested. Yeah, so
how long have you been there where you are now?
I've been here since, almost a year. We arrived in August of last year.
I think that land picks us somehow or other, calls us in.
It does.
Yeah. Do you feel
it does? I believe that it does. Yeah, I believe you're right. I think it does. I think that also there's something about this land that softens, you know, I think that it's all about contrast, isn't it? It's like this land is so hard and so tough to exist in it. You know, the people here, it's not an easy life. It's a bit of a struggle. We have water switched on for an hour a day. We have electrical power cuts within our country, but that's another issue. But the water's an issue. So we have to collect whatever rainwater we get in our JoJo tanks. The municipal water comes on for an hour. So water's a big issue. There's a lot of people living quite harshly here. And I think that the contrast for me is that this very arid, very dry, very tough, the rocks are even hard. It softens you inside, you know, if you allow yourself to. You can, it's like anything in life, the minute you hold on too tight, you know, I had a friend who once said, if you hold on too tight, the only thing you end up with is sweaty palms. And it's so true. I think if you just relax into it, this land can be so gentle and it can be so invigorating and so uplifting that you grow as a human, and you grow in gentleness. I know I've been putting flowers and I never spray smelly stuff, but I've been spraying smelly stuff in this house and lighting candles. And I think that's the whole contrast to this, to my surroundings. And that to me is a gift, you know, to have that.
Yeah. And I'm still thinking about one of the first sentences you said about going to the shops and passing the giraffe. And I just feel like I had a little walk down to the shops today and all I passed was houses. And I just cannot imagine how glorious that would be, to be out on that land. And there's so much there that you said that actually reminds me of our first trip out to Uluru in this country, and that's out in the Red Desert, and they hadn't had rain out there for 7 years when we first went out, and each time we've gone back there's been more and more rain, and that we've watched the landscape change and the animals change, and the whole way you interact and connect with the land as the water comes
is so different. And that, you know, even what you spoke to there about just having water for an hour a day, I mean, I can't imagine what that's like and how that changes your life. I mean, that's fascinating to me and feels very difficult to live in those circumstances as well.
I think that, you know, what Africa has done for me is that I don't take anything for granted. I appreciate all the little things, and I think that you can, yes, you can knock up against things, but I think that knocking up against things is really just that, you're knocking up against it. Whereas if you ease into things and just, it's like, I think it's a bit like surrender, I think is the word, is that you surrender into things and then they're not so difficult. They actually become part and parcel of your daily life. And I think you find richness in things. So yes, there are times when it's when there's airlocks in the pipes because of there's obviously all knock-on effects, because now there's airlocks in the pipe because the water's not consistent. So you have to deal with things like that. But that's all just stuff, really, at the end of the day.
It's interesting. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a girlfriend the other day, because for some reason I tend to put myself in living situations where it's not quite comfortable. Like, I love camping. I tend to put myself in living situations where I'm not, it's not luxurious. There's something always a little bit weird or off for. And for me, it's kind of like the more it's like that, the more you experience life. Like, even if it's harsh or hard, it kind of makes life a bit more interesting. It makes me feel more alive. And it certainly sounds like that with where you are. And, you know, the water thing, you know, that you're living, like it's real living, experiencing, being in the moment.
It feels kind of pioneering.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm so looking forward to England when I can turn the tap on and water comes out. And I'm looking forward to actually, I'm like, Fiona, I want to go and walk down the road and get to a shop. I'm just walking down the road. I'm looking forward to that. And I love to be in the city. But I think that, like you, Denny, is like this contrast of having that, but also having the ability to have that very vast, you know, kind of rural existence is something that, you know, if we can have those contrasts, it does bring us alive. Because too much of, it's always the same thing, too much of one and you want the other.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And it's something that we experience, isn't it, Fee, with being out on land. It's we go out there and it's dry and it's hot and it's you know, so many in so many ways quite harsh, and yet we just long to be out there when we're back.
Yeah, I think it's a lot like sailors. I'm not a sailor. I know you, Denny, live by the water, but I think it's the same thing for sailors. They want that big expanse of ocean. And I think that's what it is too for them, is that being that feeling insignificant makes you feel like you have purpose. And I think that you realize how small you are in this big world when you're in this kind of land. But also, you know, you look up at the stars. I know you girls must do that too when you're out there. I walk out at night and I just see this very strong Milky Way, because there's not much light out here, obviously, when there's not much houses. And you see this incredible, big universe. And when you wake up in the morning and you see this little sliver of orange in the distance, and that's the sun, you know, peeking its way through, or the moon's going down. Those little things are what make us feel so much a part of this big universe, and make you realize how sometimes ego is too big. Our egos take over too much, and I think that it's humbling. I find this kind of thing humbling. it's a gift really to be here.
Yeah. There was, I think, one of the ladies that we were out with recently when we last went out to the desert in May, described it as being everything and nothing all in one moment. And that total, it encapsulated for me just exactly how it feels when you're out there. It is so big and you feel so insignificant, but it feels like it's everything in that moment.
That is so beautiful. Everything and nothing. Repeat that again. Everything and nothing.
Everything and nothing in one moment. Yes. Just the bigness and the smallness of it all, which was just beautiful. I can't claim it, and I can't remember who said it, but it certainly stuck with me.
It sounds like the perfect byline for your adventures.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we should steal that one, Fee.
Yeah, definitely. I won't remember it though until it comes up in a moment like this.
Can you describe the land a little bit for us, Trayci, where you are now? Is it like very flat, or have you what give us an idea of?
Okay, so the best way to describe this land is, I think, the 1820 settlers arrived in South Africa and they discovered this, his name was Piet Retief, and he must have come along here through the thorn bushes over this slightly hilly path that he created for himself. I mean, can you imagine traveling in those ox wagons? Those ox wagons would have been, I've seen them, they are just rudimentary 4 wheels or two, they're 2 wheels, sometimes 2 wheels and a horse or an ox-drawn wagon, or 4 wheels with a straight wooden bench with a piece of cloth draped over the top. And this is how families traveled. And bear in mind, a lot of them came from, if you think back of the 1820s, things were kind of cushy in England in those days, and they'd come here as pioneers. So Piet Retief and his family must have stumbled upon this little, it's a little restful place in a valley between low hills. So it's like this, it would have been in those days a very lush, very beautiful valley with lots of water. And they settled here back then in the 1820s. He built his farmhouse, the typical colonial houses. I'm living in one of them with very high ceilings, pressed ceilings. They would have imported all their beautiful things. I also traveled on ox wagon. I just can't imagine it. And they lived here and they built their farms and built their life and raised their children here and had their religion here and their spirituality. And this was their sacred space. And the locals, worked with them in this area. I mean, it was to build these big homesteads. I mean, there's a beautiful church here. It's the 17th oldest church in the country. And its bell, the bell came from, in fact, our bell was destined for your country. Yeah, it was because it was destined for, was it Adelaide? I think it was destined for Adelaide in your country, and it ended up here. And so I think the original bell to this church ended up with us. And we've now got another bell, which my husband has rung. I think we have to clear away late 1800 pigeon poo to get to it. But it's amazing. It's just intriguing. This whole place is intriguing. When you ask about the land, we're going into winter, like deep winter now. So everything is starting to dry up, and the fynbos, which is the scruffy bushes, are a sort of sagey color with very dry, spiky, harsh bush in between are massive anthills. There's lots of ants here. And so there's these lovely big anthills everywhere. But in between, the aloes are now flowering. So you've got these bursts of orange candelabra in the bush against the sage and this dry thorns, big thorns as big as my hand, which the cattle eat. I can't imagine how the cattle eat these thorns. And succulents, big cactus, huge cactus, which fruit once a year. But these candelabra, to me, I mean, these bursts of orange are just unbelievable. How, and when the sun hits them, the orange changes. So there's like these gifts that come throughout the year as the seasons change. And it's a different kind of season here to what I've known before. So I've now almost been here a year, and I've seen a full season change. I came at the end of the aloe season, and I'm now in that aloe season. So it almost feels like a full circle.
And when you say it's different than where you were, is it are the temperatures like more extreme? Are you sort of like a hotter summers and colder winters? What's that? What do you mean by that?
Temperatures I think are more extreme. I think that and also, you know, I don't have my creature comforts around me of home because my furniture is sitting on a dock in a half a container somewhere. So I'm feeling the cold a whole lot more than I would normally do. But yes, it's summertime. It's much hotter. The hills look coarser and rougher to what I'm used to. You know, I'm used to in inland, it's very gentle. In the Midlands, it's very gently rolling hills with gentle streams. Here, it's not like that at all. It's a lot more open, wide open space. With land, when you drive through the main Karoo, which we did recently, and we actually drove through a big locust swarm, which was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I don't know if you've ever been in a locust swarm. It's just, for as far as you can see, these locusts are approaching you. And the noise is incredible, and it darkens the sky, and you don't know, it looks otherworldly, and you feel you don't know what you're experiencing until locusts start hitting you in the face, and that's pretty creepy. But but for miles, for as far as you can see, these locusts. And you know the devastation that they're going to do, because you know the minute they land, the land is going to be destroyed. And you know that the farmers are in for a very tough time because it's going to affect our crops. But that was the most incredible thing. But for as far as you can see, it's like this just swarming locusts. But equally, as far as you can see, is this land where you know actually that no man is really ever going to walk on this land. It's just so vast. I know you must experience that in your country too. Is that these vast spaces of nothing, but of shrub. And I almost feel like I can see dinosaurs walking across there. It's got that look about it for me.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean by that, because when you are out on that type of land, time change. Well, we describe it as time changes. It's almost like time all comes to one point. So when you say you can imagine seeing dinosaurs, it's because the land is so untouched and unchanged for so long that you can see the history right there in front of you as if it's happening now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think that's what brought me to thinking about, when you say history of the land, also history of the people that have been before. You know, you talked in your podcast about previously about ancestry, and I think I look in this area and I think about Piet Retief, and I think about all all his family that have subsequently lived here. And when where I came from is near Pietermaritzburg, inland, which is where Piet Retief went to sign the treaty with Dingaan. And that's when Dingaan murdered him. So his journey was from this area back to Pietermaritzburg. And my journey was in reverse of that, from Pietermaritzburg here. So I don't know if there's some kind of significance or some kind of like energy that, you know, that exists there in that pathway. But I'm in this home and it's surrounded by these really beautiful photographs, old sepia tone photographs in these big, thick gold frames of people that I'll never meet and people that I have no connection with. Yet my connection is this place, these walls, and this village. And there is no, it only exists, there's nothing tangible. It all exists in kind of an intangible form, that these people walked they would have walked these hills where I'm walking now with my dog, and they would have helped build the infrastructure that exists here now. And I find that really fascinating. I see these pictures of these people and I've tried to imagine them in this land, because it would have been different there. It would have been farming land. Even this property here, you can see where they grew vegetables. And if you walk further down, you could to the little river, you can see where the spring the spring was, where everyone would go to do their washing. So they had servants in those days who would gather, and so that the farmer across the road, who owns the goats and the sheep that I feed because I'm totally in love with them, and go out and buy cucumbers, especially because the one goat loves cucumbers and the other one loves mangoes. And he tells me these great stories about how his mother worked in this house as the maid. And he, as a young lad, would come and tend to the garden here. And the spring that existed down the road, just further on the field below his property, is where everyone went to do their washing. So you can actually see all the remnants of where they gathered. And you can imagine, you sit there and you can see the framework of the stones that held the water, and where these women would go and wash and gather as a community. And now Mr. Mani owns the farm across the road from me, which he saved by transporting rocks. And he tells me he's a very funny man. He never tells me exactly, always tells me in rhyme. So he tells me a story about how he was a geological assistant. And I think what he really means, he used to travel around the village with a wheelbarrow collecting rocks, because I think that's what people do. And I love his explanation. So I never know whether he's actually was in fact a geological assistant holding a master, whether he had a wheelbarrow. But anyway, Mr. Vardy has got all these lovely goats and sheep and cows and things, and he owns the farm across the road from me, and I hear these lovely stories through him of his past.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And I know we haven't really even talked about your work as an artist and a ceramicist. I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and also maybe how your work has, I guess, connected to the land, how you've, how that's changed maybe in your work, this connection that you've had with the land out there. Has it influenced you in any way?
So going back to the ceramics, I've always been a maker. My whole life I've been a maker, and I've been in the arts my entire life. So the gallery was 15 years of owning a gallery. and showcasing other artists' work alongside our own. We also had a very large ceramic production company where I trained other artists to produce ceramics. And that feels like a whole lifetime ago now. But essentially, I started off as a ceramic maker. I wanted to be a photographer, and ended up being a drama student. And then ended up in England and went to study photography eventually. And on the stairs met a potter who said, no, you can do photography anytime. Come to my pottery studio. And so I ended up making pots, and he never allowed me to throw in the wheel because he was from North Africa. And he says, you're from Africa, you can't throw in a wheel, you need to coil pots. So I learned how to coil pots, and I still wanted to be a photographer. And so then I came back to South Africa when my dad was ill and was besotted with clay, and carried on making pots, and became very ill myself with an autoimmune disorder, and ended up having to give up my job in advertising, which I absolutely loved, and carried on making pots. And my pots were always stories, because I'm self-taught in everything I do, really. I think I dig deep into, what I want to do. And I never really look outside for influence. It normally just comes from me, from where I'm at. But fortunately, I was able to build a business and sustain my husband and myself, because he left his job in the corporate world to join us. And I was able to provide employment for others, for our local people, and train them in our area. And that was so enriching for me. Then one day I decided, no, I was painting on pots, and I was getting quite frustrated that the slips were burning away, the color was burning away. And I'd stumbled upon Louise Fletcher and took a course with her back in 2019, and then did a transition between pots and painting, gave up, sold the gallery, sold everything, moved here, and thought that I really wanted to paint grungy black paintings. I had this idea that I wanted them to be, I kind of had this image of myself in a big warehouse. I guess my head was in like Stockholm or somewhere, kind of really urban and and I was like wanting to paint these things, but it's not in me. I've got lightness in me, and it took me a long time to really kind of just accept that. That I'm trying to access grungy and dark, and the only thing I could access that was illness. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to be defined by autoimmune disorder, and I don't want to be defined by limitations of health. So that was where I had to go if I wanted to do grungy, because that was my relationship with darkness. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. So I just had to let that become peaceful, be at peace with that, I guess. And so I've been painting frivolous stories about the chickens and the goats and all the animals that I've fallen in love with and connect with. And the farmers here don't get me. They think I'm totally nuts because I call them names. I've got names for them. I cook the chicken spaghetti because I know she loves spaghetti. She's eating important Italian spaghetti, and she's laying eggs for me. She's laying them here, but I can't eat enough eggs. I just don't know what. There's like this surplus of eggs in my house. I don't know what to do. I've gone through eggnog, egg. How many ways can you cook an egg? And also, I feel really bad cooking Gromit's babies every time I cook her eggs. So I don't know. I'm giving away eggs.
They're not her babies unless they're
her babies. I stopped eating lamb when I fell in love with the goats, and I can only eat, what can I eat? Anyway, So I've been baking cakes for people so that I could just get rid of grommets eggs. But so this land, when it comes to my art, look, I've just had to, back to that word surrender. I rented the church hall stage for a while, and I started painting really big canvases because I had the space. And so I was painting abstract storms when the storm came, and I was loving it. And I was printing on jelly plates, and I was thinking, but the time came for me to give that up because I had to move the container. I had to put all my stuff into a container to move. So I had to give that space up. So now I'm back into one room in this big house. And it's a limitation for me now because I don't have those big canvases that I can paint on. I'm ready to preparing to move. And so at first it was quite frustrating. I found it very frustrating. I felt that, what am I? Who am I as an artist? What am I? What, I felt like I was on a starting block of a race and the gun had gone off and I'd gone, and then suddenly someone had put up a piece of tape and said, no, off the track. So I'm off the track right now. But I'm on a track, if you know what I mean. I'm just painting these stories as they come out. So there's chickens and there's goats and there's aloes and there's all sorts of things mushed in together in a little square panel board with whatever limited paints and brushes I've got here. So I paint a lot with my fingers now. Stuart made me some boards before he left, so I've got those. And I think that my creativity is coming out in different ways. I'm becoming more involved in my job with Art Tribe, and I've been using my creativity there. So that when I do finally settle again, it'll come out in another way. So that's where I'm at, really.
I think with things like this, you only ever see it when when you've passed it and you're looking back, and then you go, I can see how it all fits together and how that all worked. Kind of like how you retraced the steps from where you went down to where you are now in reverse of the man who started that area. It's kind of like you probably don't see why at the moment, but certainly that's something that I think Fee and I have discovered from Uluru, is that we can't work out the bits at the time. And then we look back and go, okay, it's all making sense now. Why we had to wait, or why we went there, or why we met that person, or all the kind of synchronicities that happen. They all just end up weaving this incredible story that you only see once you're the other end of it and you look back. It feels like that you're in the midst of that now.
Yeah, and I think that if you try and control the outcome, you miss the bits in between. You miss these gems, and so that's what I decided. I thought I would use this time to. You'd never know how you're going to respond, do you? You never know. It's really hard to plan for your. I thought I will write. Maybe I would write because I love to write. Maybe I would use this time writing. Maybe I would paint whatever. But to be honest, if you just give into the moment will tell you what to do. And I've just been in the moment here, just not worried too much about where it takes me. And I think you're right. I think that those are the gems that get put into your pocket so that we can look back and unpack our pockets. And maybe when I'm sitting in my little village in England, in Tewkesbury, I can start unpacking all these little experiences that I've had here in Region East.
Yeah. So what takes you to Tewkesbury in the UK? What's the draw there?
England was the draw. Stuart's family are all in England. And it's time. I think it's time for him to be around his family now. His mum's getting on, and it's a new chapter. And I think that a whole change. It's like Danny was saying, Virginie, you something different. something completely different, where you're out of your, you're out of your normality in your zone. It's a new challenge. And so we needed to rent a place, and we've been looking, and it's not easy to rent housing in England, especially when you have no credit history there. And you're self-employed, and so you have animals. So
Yes.
we've taken our pet. So we found a lovely little place, and we fortunately have got it. And Stuart moves in next week, and I'm so looking forward to getting there and starting again and seeing. Look, it's scary as hell, because you go there and I've got no history here. I've had a gallery. I've got artists who know me. I've got businesses who know me. I've got doctors here. I've got all my medical history here. I have none of that there. And those are big challenges, but I'm not putting my head there, because otherwise I think fear will freeze me and not allow me to move forward.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of trust that's got to happen, that it's all unfolding for you.
Yeah. But look, also, I mean, what we've done with online, the connections that we make with people online now has been phenomenal for us as creative people. We have got, because we all have our heart and our soul in the right place. I've met the most phenomenal people through Art Tribe who I know will be lifelong friends. I've now met you two, and these connections that we make, they're soulful stuff. There's no flippancy here. It's deep stuff. I think it's stuff that, us, especially with women, we need these genuine friendships that we can call on and that we can be our authentic selves with. And I feel like we're journeying together, all of us. And that is, how can you be fearful when you've got these people in your lives now?
Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting, I think, this journey into, how the world has changed over the last couple of years, and we've kind of been more isolated. I don't know how you've been experiencing that over there, but we've been drawn inwards and spending more time on our own. In fact, when we went out to Uluru the last time, Denny and I hadn't actually physically seen each other for about 7 months before we went. We just connected this way every, a couple of times a week, which was beautiful. But
and we literally we live 15 minutes apart, just so that like we live close. But we still hadn't seen each other in the flesh for about 7 months.
Yeah. And it's almost as if we've been drawn into our own spaces, into our own inner world, to reconnect in this different way, and to see and to have the ability to connect in this vastness of the world, with each other, which is beautiful. I mean, to sit here and talk to you where you are and where we are, and then to know that people that watch this or listen to this will be in other countries as well, and can enjoy the conversation, is just such a deep way of us as women connecting with each other and reweaving the threads of disconnection that we've experienced over many, many, many lifetimes. So it is deep. I totally agree with you there.
And I think also is that we shouldn't underestimate what COVID has done for all of us. We've all experienced it in so many different ways, but universally, that disconnection that it did to us, we were not prepared. No one could ever be prepared for that. And I think that as humans, we grappled with trying to find new ways of reconnecting, and I think we've done exceptionally well as humanity in holding on to each other during this very difficult time, because we've had to experience things in a very short, a compact period of time that has hit on us emotionally in ways that we can't yet articulate. I think in years to come, we'll we'll look back on this time. Like, I think we're already starting to do that. Now that there's traces of, we're still wearing masks in this country. In England, they're not. And that for me was quite, even going there last year was quite tricky for me, because now suddenly I'm walking in the street and I'm going into stores when no one had masks on. And I've been protected for all this time with a mask, and I'm not a fearful person, but I kind of felt a vulnerability that was put on me, and now I have to deal with it in another way. And these experiences are also new, that no one could prepare. There wasn't some person at the top going, okay, this is how you deal with it. This is how you approach the next step. We all had to kind of figure it out for ourselves, didn't we? We had to figure out how, so many relationships went badly because they were now forced to live in close proximity. And so many relationships went badly because they were forced to live apart. And so it was a bizarre time. And trying to now, we're still in it. We're still in it because we're trying to figure out ways out of it.
Well, and we're going to live with the remnants of it. For instance, the amount of people that we know online now, and the way we connect. I know that when before COVID, we did a lot of women's groups where we'd meet physically, and when during the 2 years that we were virtually in lockdown during the whole time, our online worlds became so much richer, and in that we connected with women in a way all around the world. So we were in our little worlds, but also connecting in a much greater way than we ever had. So it's again that kind of from one spectrum to the other. It's an interesting time. And I look at it with my kids and how the way that they relate to people has changed. It just is. And for young kids, this will be such a huge part of what forms them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also we probably also speak up more. Before, I think we didn't articulate how we were feeling. We kind of kept ourselves close to ourselves, I think. And I think I'm seeing a lot more of people speaking up a lot more and exposing themselves a lot more in that sense. And it is definitely changing our society in so many different ways that it does sometimes, for some people, it takes longer to feel comfortable with that too. And so there's all these other knock-on effects, mental, emotional effects that people are experiencing because of it as well.
Yeah. I think one of the great learnings that's come out of this experience is for all of us to be more comfortable with expressing our emotions and to ride the current of our emotions and not suppress our emotions anymore, and be okay with what we're feeling in any given moment. I know that's been a journey for a lot of people who maybe were used to suppressing their emotions and not allowing them to surface. And this time that we've been in has given us the opportunity to both accept that with others and within ourselves as well, as we become more comfortable with that emotional journey. And it's important, I think, that we allow the space for that. I can remember going through a time when, because one of the natural things you say to people when you meet them is, "Oh, how are you?" Or, "How are you today?" And and when everyone would ask me that question, you automatically sometimes you just say, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm good," even when you actually weren't. And there was this sort of adjustment to that that I noticed within myself of, what, actually in this moment, I don't feel okay. And I think it's okay for me to say that. No, I feel really angry in this moment, or I feel really, Yeah, not too good today, but it's okay because it's going to move through and it'll be fine. And I think we have all become more open to sharing that with each other, which is a good thing, I think.
Mm. 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 I think so. I think you're right.
I think that being in women's groups, that's a big part of that as well, because I think when you're in a group of women, you tend to let your walls down a lot easier and go to the heart of what's going on. I know these days, if I'm ever asked how are you, my standard answer is I'm lots of things, because in every moment I'm always lots of things. There's never really just one thing. There's like so many, and you know, we hold them all at the same time, and that's okay. You know, you can be many things in the same moment. I think that's what's come out of this time. It's one thing I was thinking of as you two were speaking was how this time has really polarized people in terms of what their beliefs and what they think is going on, and just the ideas of what COVID has done, and I think leadership, and it just feels like it's really polarized people into what were probably places that they wouldn't have been without COVID. I think it's really brought up a lot of opinions and truths for people. I know that was the subject of our podcast last year, was this truth series that we did, Trayci, where it was just we had different women on and we asked them what do you know to be true? And it was such an interesting series that we did, because when you get right down to it, it's fascinating how it's hard to put your finger on what is true. And I think that these last couple of years, I think that a lot of the truths have just changed. And
I think that's such a good topic, because especially with the way the manipulations of social media in spilling untruths or mistruths, that it's really important for individuals to know their own truth, and also to educate themselves, so that they are able to make a balanced opinion on things, and also to trust your own gut. I think as women, I know for me, it's taken me a long time to really trust those red flags that come up, and to actually trust my own intuition, and to act on it in a sensitive way that is not harmful to me, that is beneficial to me. Because a lot of times, you know, you see women, I don't know, maybe it's just my age or where I was raised. You know, women in this country only got a vote within my lifetime, and I think that there was so much that was taken, that was not allowed us. And I think that when I look at my mother's generation, you know, the women weren't as strong as women that I'm seeing now. My nieces, and they've got a sense of strength about their own self, and are proud to be women. And I think that we're still dealing with the after effects of women not having that voice. So I think that back to that truth is that, you know, learning to trust your own truth and your own judgment and acting on it is so important.
I feel like, you know, I'm looking at the time, we've been talking for almost an hour, and it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of getting to know you and your journey and your connection to land. And I would love you to come on again, maybe, and explore some of these topics that we've brought up today in more depth and more detail. It would be just so lovely to get a perspective from someone who's in a different country and has a different, you know, history to, you know, where you are at this moment as a woman who lives where you do. And I know you'll be moving to the UK soon, but you've got such a beautiful richness of knowledge around, you know, living in South Africa. It would be beautiful to explore that more with you.
Thank you, Fiona. I'd be delighted to do that. I think that the conversations that the two of you have are always so rich, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that I can listen to the two of you while I'm working, and I know a lot of women do that with, you know, following you. So that would be an amazing invitation. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, we'll definitely do that when you've settled in your new home, and you know, because there's so much more that we didn't even reach today, about the land that you're on and about the people, which was the other big topic that we can talk about next time. Thank you so much, Trayci, and I'll put a link to your website and also to your Insta page for everyone, so that they can find you and see your beautiful artwork and your ceramics as well, and the stories. I read the book on your webpage, which was very entertaining with all the animals. It's beautiful. So I'll make sure that I put a link there for everyone so that they can find it.
Thank you, Denny, and thank you, Fiona. It's so lovely to connect with you this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon, and good luck with the transition over to the UK.
Thank you so much.